cloud. Welcome to the July 1st, 2021 Helm Weekly Developer Call. Happy Canada Day or happy new fiscal year, whatever it is you're celebrating today. I'm Bridget. I'll be your moderator today. We have Dr. Butcher on notes, and yeah, let's get into it. I'll toss it over to Mr. Farina, who has some release info for us.
All right. So this week we launched Helm 3.6.2 because the security fix that came out in 3.6.1 ended up taking an existing bug and causing it to become much more pronounced. It used to only affect like SNI network stuff, and then it started affecting lots of other things. And so 3.6.2 fixed that regression. Yeah. And so what was supposed to be the first patch release for 3.6 will now be 3.6.3, coming out hopefully on the 14th? The 14th. And so maintainers, please go spend a few minutes in there reviewing some of the pull requests. Some of them are very, very easy to review, like they could take you minutes of time. So please go in there for some of the simple fixes that could be taken a look at and need a review. We've got 2 weeks.
All right, and you say that the release is scheduled for July 14th. When would you say you want to cut the, wait, you don't cut RCs.
This is a patch. Yeah, we don't cut RCs
so,
for these patches. Yeah.
So people have all the way up until the 14th to hem and haw and make decisions.
Yes. And also remember though, that if when we merge it, the person who ends up merging it, we're trying to do the cherry picking it to the release branch as early as possible. So that way it's cherry picked and in. So.
All right. Thank you so much. Any other announcements? Okay, move on to discussion items. I had one I added, which is we're going to maybe archive the Helm Hub repo, and I see that we have Scott Rigby started that process. And so I just dropped a link in there, and it looks like he has a pull request in progress. So if we can move forward on that one, and I'm dropping a link in the chat here as well, then we can hopefully make that migration to Artifact Hub like complete by fully deprecating the Helm Hub repo. So that's just one I'm highlighting. And then there was another one, the Helm repo audit repo. I heard you liked repos, so I thought I'd audit your repo by looking at your repo audit repo. Yeah. Basically, I'm not sure what's going on with that one, but it kind of looks like it might have been for a project that or an experiment that is not continuing. So perhaps that one is also ready for archival. Perhaps.
Maybe I'd actually forgotten about this one here. So this project was something for charts and the Helm Hub and all this stuff back in the day to audit your repo and give you suggestions or checks things. So one of the things it'll do is it'll look at things like your index. Right now, it'll do things like look at your index file and then look at the charts in your repo, and it'll notice if the die adjusts for the charts don't match the die adjusts listed in the repo, because there are situations where this can happen, such as you're constantly rebuilding and it's not idempotent right now. It'll catch those things. And we had other ideas for things we could check and look at to see about repo auditing. And I don't know if this is something that should be, if maybe we should talk about picking up again when we talk about our suites of tools and security. Like this picked out a security thing. I'd forgotten about it.
All right, great. So maybe one for somebody who wants to get involved to take a look at and see what they can do with.
Yes, and die adjusts. Yes, did I misspell something somewhere?
Is that the same as digest?
Yeah, I don't even see the misspelling.
I think it's actually just you stumbled over it when you said it aloud. So
yes,
fine.
digest. Sorry, it's my Midwest accent. Yeah, so this is something us charts maintainers may want to talk about again at some point. I'm not sure if I'm ready to do this one or if we should pick it back up. It's a charts maintainers project. So
okay, awesome.
Thank you for bringing this one up.
Yeah. Okay, and then our next topic, back to you, Matt Farina, talking about automatically adding repos during build processes.
Okay, so there's an issue here about adding repositories during build processes, right? And I think on repo or on dependency update, we automatically pull in the repositories and add it. And then on build, we actually say, hey, you haven't added this repository. You must add it before you can pull in the chart. And this is one of those things that every so often comes up and it's like, is it a bug? Is it not a bug? Do we need to reconcile it? And so I thought we should air it out here and maybe in a few other places. As I understand it, automatically adding a repository weakens security. And the reason is somebody can go ahead and, stick a dependency and another repository that somebody hasn't bothered to add. They basically haven't opted into, and then it automatically gets pulled in without you realizing it. And this is for, of course, the maintainer who's actually building the chart. If you're a consumer of a chart and you're not updating, you're just pulling and installing, you don't have this. And so this is somebody who's actually dealing with the dependencies in their chart. And so if you don't know that a dependency is being pulled in and where it's coming from, you haven't opted into that, that's a problem. I would love to rip out the automation in Helm dependency update, but that's backwards breaking compatible. And so that's like that's a Helm v4 thing. But the issue here talked about, well, let's make them the same by automatically adding it. And that's one of those things that I don't want to do because it weakens security, because it removes that opt-in model to actually knowing where your dependency comes from as somebody who is a chart maintainer. This isn't a chart consumer who's installing it, but somebody who's actually building and dealing with the dependencies inside. So that's my 2 cents on it. And I wanted to kind of have a discussion here. So what do people think? I saw Dr. Butcher nodding his head.
Yeah, it actually can cause some fairly severe security issues because you can just about mask packages by playing around with alpha ordering and things like that, so that it appears that you have the official WordPress chart rather than, or maybe not even using the word official. You can provide charts that would compete with other people's charts, and because of the way commands work, people might not even notice that they're installing a chart from a location that they never intentionally added. So yeah, I'm opposed to all things that involve automatically adding sources where you can get potentially untrusted packages. And with software supply chain attacks being in the news every week, making it easier to perform a software supply chain attack is probably not a good move for us. So the attack vector, by the way, would be somebody intercepts chart repository well down the stream for a one-off kind of chart, modifies that chart repository to point to another chart repository to potentially point to another one, and then you can kind of do these sequential attacks and have lots of repositories get automatically added until you do whatever it is you're setting out to do. Yeah, and if you look at to further Joe's point, this is why like apt-get and things like that make you jump through a lot of hoops to add untrusted repositories, because they want to make sure that attacks like this don't get automatically propagated through even simple shell scripts and things like that.
So since I brought this up, I think unless somebody objects to it, I'll either find an issue that says we want to remove this in Helm v4, or I'll create an issue to do the automatic adding in Helm v4 just to because it's breaking, and then I'll respond to this issue and pull request about it. It's just to point out, hey, there's a reason for it. I can do that since I brought it up here.
That sounds like a reasonable course of action.
Do any of the other core maintainers disagree? Because I see there's several, or anybody else here disagree with what Matt and I have said? Okay.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Next up, Adam, do you want to talk to us a bit more about annotations nested in list objects not being respected, which is terrible. They should definitely be respected.
Yeah, I'll just insert another plug. To be honest, I didn't think about that this past week. And because there's no updates to the issue, I'm assuming no one else did also. So I'll just bring up the issue again. It's around list objects and annotations only being respected at the top level and not individual objects for annotations like keep. So if you apply a keep label to an object within a list, Helm will still delete it. Frina, you unmuted?
I'm thinking, how do we handle list objects in general? Do they just work most of the time?
So here's the issue. When we're parsing for the first initial parse of templates, we just do our own parsing into our own object. And that's when we check annotations. So we don't flatten the list before checking to see, is this something we want to send to delete or not? The final parsing is done by the Kubernetes client, which will flatten list objects. So if the annotation is applied to the top level list object, if the keep label, keep annotation is on the top level list, then we'll keep that entire list. If there's a single object within that list that has the keep annotation, we just ignore it.
I'm not sure the right way to handle this. Does anybody have?
Yeah, do I?
an
That's
opinion
why
here?
I'm bringing it up in here.
I feel like it's fair to say that we only respect the annotations on whatever that top level object is. If we do it for lists, are we then going to have people start asking us to do it for other things where you might have nested resources? So maybe this is a documentation thing more than something we need to work on.
Yeah, because some of it is if you have a keep on a nested item on the list, right? Does that mean we rewrite the list to take that off of it for the delete? Like, I'm trying to think of how we'd even approach this if one item
Yeah,
had it.
that's the thing, is we would have to if we'd have to have a condition that, okay, is this item a list item? Then check the nested ones. But then we're going to get into a situation where we have to handle list objects as well as individual objects. And what if a keep is added or taken away from a list object or from a nested object? How does that get handled? So it's going to get very complex. So I'm almost along the lines with Paul's thinking of that we just say the list or the keep annotation should only be applied to top level objects.
That sounds good to me, because I'm trying to think about how we would do a different scenario. And it seems like complicated, possibly brittle logic that's going to take us a lot of testing to get right. But it makes sense to me to say it only applies to the top level.
I wonder how easy it would be to do a warning if we see them.
You know, we could probably do something with Helm lint that if we see it in a nested object, we warn you that it won't be applied. That should be very doable. Kind of like that idea. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, I think that'd probably be the safest way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if we try to implement anything that checks it at this point, like we're going to introduce breaking changes. Like there's no way around that where we're going to have unexpected behavior for somebody. because plus it'd be a major change in code path also.
Yeah. So yeah, how about this? Yeah, I like this. For Helm v3, we just do a lint to warn people when it won't be run, and we update the documentation to tell people that this is just for top level objects, which is basically just better documenting the existing behavior.
Okay. Sounds like we have a reasonable path forward. Anything else on this one? Okay. Trying to decide if Butcher is waving me on or
Sorry,
waving at
mosquito.
bugs.
There's a mosquito flying around. In
He's like,
He's being attacked.
lovely. Yeah, and let the record show that policy, while muted, is telling us in the chat that we could tell people to make a hit for Helm 4, which is reasonable. Yes. Okay, moving on to, speaking of hips, there's one hip that I think is just about ready to merge. So I just wanted to kind of highlight it for everyone's attention, the distributed pick process. We have a couple of approvals. Perhaps this one is one people want to make sure they've weighed in on. So if it isn't in yet, it will be very soon. So
I'll take the action to go take one last look at it, because the distributed pick, we just dealt with it around the security stuff. And so let me just do one quick read. If everything still looks good, since we've been futzing with this lately and actually trying to apply this thing, I'll go review it.
theory
And if not, I'll
versus
merge it. I'll
practice.
take it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Farina. The last item we have on our list is Farina going to continue to discuss indexes and OCI registries. This was a very interesting topic last week. I'm sure that we will be talking about it for the next 10 minutes, which is why before we start talking about that, I'm going to remind people that we do need volunteers for the next week. Moderator, notes, issue triage. Let's talk about that in the chat while we start talking about indexes and OCI registries. Farina, take it away.
Okay, to recap, with OCI registries and storing Helm charts today, there are a number of missing features, right? A couple of them that come out is you can't use things like Helm search to search repositories, which is a useful thing when you're trying to find your stuff. You also, one of the nice things you can actually do is when you're resolving, you've got the indexed file, you can look over all the different release versions that are available. And from that, you can extrapolate things and do resolutions. There's some nice things when you're trying to resolve it and you don't have those indexes there. And so over on Hipper, we had talked about doing this. Last week, we talked about it with Helm, and we actually talked about race conditions of pushing it 2 or more times. I ended up just pausing it so we could get to further items and giving some time to think about it. And I know Josh wasn't here for this wonderful conversation. He's very interested in the OCI stuff. And so that's kind of where we're at is, should we support indexes in there? What are the strengths? What are the pitfalls? One of the pitfalls is you can't lock, but you do have a certain amount of that today. If you've got 2 CI systems doing 2 pull requests, merging them, generating index files, you can run in that today with 2 separate things that are going concurrently. But how does that affect things like Helm push? If 2 people pushed at the same time and you miss a revision, it's a little bit different or the same. And then, of course, how do we support other things such as searching and resolving versions? I think that is an important thing to be able to make sure you get to all of your metadata in order to look at resolutions. Because, right, I might want to say I want chart caret, 1.2.3 for something in OCI. And how do I do that resolution to find out which one is less than 2, but greater than 1.2.3, right? Which is the latest one. And you need to have the metadata for that resolution. Now we could look at tags on the specific repository. We could do indexes. There's other things, but we want to support these things. So then ideas come up, indexes and OCI registries. What do folks think?
I can say some words. So I was saying, I think 2 weeks ago, there's the ability to list tags on a namespace. So if we're able to determine through some other process the names of charts in a parent namespace, we can list all the versions and do the semantic version comparisons. The index file in repos today, you would suffer the same race condition problem like you're saying when you're pushing, if two people are pushing over that. Let's see. From the perspective of Helm, we've, with the PR that I have open right now, we're basically adding extra rules to OCI and saying the namespace must, the base name, or like everything after the final slash must be the name of the chart. We could come up with a reserved namespace under a parent namespace. So let's say like mat/farina/charts/_index. And we could come up with our own way to work with that and forget about the race condition problem, use that as like just to put that YAML file. But I think I would rather use the OCI listing API than storing the versions in there, because that will get out of sync more easily than just the names of the charts. So if that namespace could host just the base names and not the versions. The other thing too is so Docker Hub and Amazon and Azure, those registries don't do these things, but we could add to the Docker distribution server an extension. Every time something's uploaded, it runs some custom code path, and we could build a Helm.
Yeah, I would want it to just work with native things. You know, one of the things that we do in Helm is we don't ask people to install lots of extra add-ons all over the place to make it work.
Right.
We work within the existing frameworks. It's one of the reasons we're trying not to have a controller, and we want to make it easy. And I think that definitely goes against making it easy.
I agree. My preferred way to go about this is similar to how we had when Helm 3 came out. We added the search on Helm Hub for things. I would almost prefer we do something to Artifact Hub where people can register the names of charts in a parent namespace. So you could register mat/farina/charts as the, sorry for continually using your name, in some YAML file, and then list in that file, these are all of the chart names in this parent. And then Artifact Hub could add code to go and list all the tags and bring those things in. And then you have a search command in Helm that just hits Artifact Hub.
Yeah, but that just deals with public repositories. It doesn't deal with the whole presence of private repositories. And I think that's another thing, right? Lots of people do Helm stuff and they do package management stuff with private repositories, and we want to support that.
Yeah. Well, then I think the current index format, we could, you could just simply have a new, so Helm has its own chart media type, and see ya, Paul. You could just make a new media type for the index file and just keep the exact same format. And you could point to the full blob path as the index YAML if you do Helm repo add, I think.
So let me ask this. If you have a namespace, can you list all of the sub things in that namespace?
No.
In OCI? No.
No. And as time goes on, you know, it seems like OCI, and I'm not trying to speak badly of it. It does seem like getting changes into those specs is taking longer and longer. So I wouldn't I wouldn't count on that if you're trying to get a solution right now.
Oh yeah, I'm not expecting OCI to change. I mean, to get artifacts into OCI took 2, 3, 4 years, something like that. So getting some kind of search mechanism in there is not something I would count on. I would rather try to make it work within the existing framework that works in different places. So it sounds like we have a path forward on listing versions, right? Because you can go to, you
Yes.
can basically go list the tags on a chart to do resolution, the same information you get from an index. So that might work. It becomes the search functionality that becomes a problem, and we'll probably need to look into that. The other thing that I'm curious about, and I don't know if you know this, but they figured out how to do apt transport to OCI. There's a project on it, and I'm going
I
to go
saw
poke.
that yesterday. Yeah.
I was going to go poke to see how they're handling it, because of course apt has the equivalent of indexes, and I was curious how that worked.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to look at it, but I was curious of the same.
Yeah, so I might go read that to get some ideas to see how they're handling this
Right.
problem.
Yeah, as far as discovery though, in general, if you actually go to the spec, it's broken down into 4 categories, and there's a discovery category. The only thing in discovery is listing of tags. So what you're describing is something that would fall under discovery, and that's the only method that exists for finding out what's in there, unfortunately.
Okay.
All right. We may have to have further discussions on this, which is not at all surprising, but thank you for the level of detail and links. And we are at time now, and we have volunteers for the next week. So thank you all so very much. And we will see you in a week's time. Take care.